At long last, I'm driving this, a 991 GT3, the latest and greatest incarnation of our favorite 911. First impressions are actually very positive. Stepping into this after a 997, the interior is just magnificent. The quality of the materials, the layout, the controls, all so superb. It's 475 horsepower now compared to about 435 in the outgoing 3.8 997. And while it doesn't seem like a whole lot on paper, I do feel a significant leap in performance. The new engine feels torquier through the entire rev range. It is more accessible, and now you have that extra 1,000 revs to play with. It's hard to talk about this engine without throwing a whole lot of superlatives at it, but it is just incredible. Listen to that sound. The first time you rev this engine up to 8,000 or 9,000 RPM, your mind will be blown. It is completely electrifying. It's not quite as rambunctious or raw or crude as a 3.6 or 3.8 outgoing Metzger engines, but I think it's really moved the game on in terms of pure performance and response and linearity and even satisfaction. I'm not going to shed a tear for the Metzger because this engine is better. So the GT3 is now riding on Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2s. The grip levels have shot through the roof, as has the performance envelope. Porsche has increased the dynamic range of performance, but have they also decreased the dynamic range of fun? Well, it really depends on who you ask. The most fun I have in a GT3 is getting it into that slightly raggedy edge cornering state where the entire chassis comes alive. You feel hardwired to the front and rear axles. The experience becomes electrifying. You can absolutely still chase that feeling in this 991 GT3, but you have to go a bit faster to get there. So it might be a little bit less exploitable on the open road, but on the track, you're going to be really able to chase that feeling and still get the maximum performance out of this car. There's been a lot of talk about the steering in the latest 991 GT3 and whether this electrical mechanical system lives up to the greatness in the 997 series. I'm happy to report that this electric assist steering is the real deal. It is so much better than the one you find in a regular Carrera or Carrera S. When the 991 first came out, I was quite disappointed with the steering feel. It had very little feel, it had very little feedback, and I felt that Porsche had robbed us of one of the 911's greatest and most endearing traits, the steering. With the 991 GT3, all of that is back. All of that textural feedback from the road surface, the way the steering wheel changes in weight as you load into and out of corners, feeling the contact patches and the G-forces on them. This is a delicious steering system and approaches the level of satisfaction you get from a 997 GT3. Okay, if we were to get really nitpicky, I think the 997 still has that last bit of detail, but is cutting it mighty close. There's a lot of talk in online circles about whether the software of this electric system can be applied to the regular Carrera and Carrera S's and C4S's to improve their steering. Well, I remain a little bit doubtful about that, even if you could do it. For one thing, the front suspension of the GT3 is completely different. It is GT3 specific. For another, the GT3 has active rear wheel steering system. All of that is going to have a profound impact on your steering feedback and response. If you really want GT3 levels of feedback and steering response, just get a GT3. Okay, the other elephant in the room is of course the transmission. The new GT3 is now PDK-only. There's no longer an option for a manual 3-pedal traditional gearbox. It pains me because I am a manual purist, but this transmission is just so good. Listen to those upshifts and those downshifts. There is no interruption of power flow. There's no herky-jerk histrionics. Just beautiful, uninterrupted torque and power as you build through the rev range. And it sounds so mighty. This engine is just epic. First time you rev it to 9,000 RPM, you will completely forget about the Metzger and whether you really need the old engine anymore. But back to the PDK. This gearbox I would not compare to a traditional car gearbox. It is worlds above any BMW DCT or Audi RS gearbox, or even Porsche's own PDKs and their other 911s and Boxers and Caymans. This is in a class of its own, and it actually approximates what I consider to be a true manual sequential gearbox, the kind you would find in a superbike with a quick shifter. This isn't just hyperbole. I do ride sport bikes and I do ride bikes with quick shifters, and that's what this actually feels like. It feels like a true mechanical sequential gearbox. It's hard for me to admit this, but this PDK is very involving, very mechanical feeling. I love the way the clutch engages and disengages. I love the pure aggression of it. And while I still prefer a 3-pedal manual, and I wish Porsche at least gave us an option so that I could pick it, this gearbox is so good. It is so much fun. I think they've really bridged the gap and really brought some true mechanical involvement and feel into an automatic gearbox. This is by far the best automatic I have ever driven. So I spent some time with the 991 GT3 now, and it's obvious to me that it's the modern, grown-up, polished version of our favorite 911. It is no doubt the better Porsche and a better car than all the ones that came before it. In terms of ultimate entertainment, I think I would still put the 997 GT3 for me as top pick in terms of approachability and fun, and also obtainability. If you could only afford a 991 Carrera, the Carrera S, C4S, and so forth, I would actually reconsider that decision and maybe perhaps pick up a 997 GT3. If you can afford a 991 GT3, I say absolutely go for it. It is well worth a 50% price premium over a regular Carrera. The steering, the suspension, the engine, the transmission, it goes on. The list just absolutely goes on. Going to this test, I was a little bit concerned that the latest GT3 may have been robbed of some of its raw involvement, the raw mechanical feel and driving appeal. It would no longer feel like a race car and more like a refined luxury sports car. I'm thankful and very happy to report that that is not true. This is still every bit the involving mechanical feeling, electrifying driver's machine that you always want a GT3 to be. Sure, the limits are now much higher, the performance envelope is greater, and to access that raggedy edge feeling that you love to get in a GT3 means you do have to go a little bit faster. So it's not quite as approachable on city streets. You do have to take it to the track to get the most out of it. But for value for money, I think this is right up there with the very best sports cars the world has to offer, and something I absolutely recommend.
I like where you're going with it, but yeah.
I fuck it up, right? Yeah. I'm having so much fun on this road. I can't talk. I just want to drive, right?